The sound of metal hitting metal was like music to her ears. Lisa had been hearing it since she was old enough to walk. Her dad's garage was her playground, and the smell of engine oil was as familiar as her mom's cooking. Now 28 years, old Lisa could fix almost any engine that rolled into the garage. She had learned everything from watching her father work. But what most people didn't know was that Lisa also had a college degree in engineering. She was smart with both her hands and her brain. The garage sat on the edge of town, right next to the big factory that made furniture. Most folks in town worked at that factory. It had been there for as long as anyone could remember. Lisa's dad, Roberto, had been fixing cars and trucks for 30 years. He was known all over town as the guy who could fix anything. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Rain was falling hard on the garage roof, making a drumming sound that mixed with the usual sounds of work. Lisa was under the hood of an old pickup truck when she heard the rumble of a big truck outside. "Sounds like trouble," Roberto said, wiping his hands on a rag. He had a way of knowing what kind of problem was coming just by the sound of the engine. The truck that pulled up was huge. It was carrying something covered by a heavy tarp. 3 men got out, and Lisa recognized one of them right away. It was David Peterson, the owner of the furniture factory. His family had owned the factory for 3 generations. "Roberto," Peterson called out as he walked into the garage, "I need your help with something big." Behind him came 2 other men. One was the factory manager, and the other was a guy in a suit who looked like he didn't belong in a garage. They all had worried looks on their faces. "What kind of trouble are we talking about?" Roberto asked. Peterson pointed to the truck outside. "We've got an engine problem that nobody can solve. It's the main engine that runs our factory. Without it working right, we can't make furniture fast enough. We're losing money every single day." Lisa looked up from the pickup truck she was working on. She had heard about the factory's problems around town. People were worried about their jobs. "How long has it been giving you trouble?" Roberto asked. "About 6 months now," the factory manager said. "At first we thought it was just old age. The engine is from the 1940s. But then it got worse. Now it only runs at about half power." The man in the suit stepped forward. "I'm John Cooper from Advanced Engine Solutions. We've had 3 different companies look at this engine, all the best mechanics in the state. Nobody can figure out what's wrong." Lisa put down her tools and walked over to listen. She had always been curious about difficult problems. "The weird thing is," Cooper continued, "all the tests say the engine should be running perfectly. Compression is good. Fuel system is clean. Timing is exactly right. But it just won't give us full power." Peterson looked frustrated. "We're desperate. If we can't fix this engine soon, we might have to shut down the factory. That means a lot of people will lose their jobs." Roberto scratched his head. "I've never worked on an industrial engine that big. Most of what I do is cars and trucks." "We know," Peterson said. "But we've heard you can fix things that other people can't. We're willing to pay well for the right solution." The men went outside to uncover the engine. When Lisa saw it, her eyes went wide. It was massive, bigger than any engine she had ever seen. It was painted green and had thick metal pipes going in all directions. Words on the side said, "Fairbanks Morse Diesel Engine, 1943. "She's a beauty," Roberto said, walking around the huge machine. "But I've never seen anything like her." Lisa was already studying the engine carefully. Something about it caught her attention, but she couldn't say what yet. She had learned to trust her instincts when it came to mechanical problems. Cooper pulled out a thick folder. "Here are all the test results from the other companies. Everything checks out perfect on paper. It's like the engine is hiding something from us." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "Well, look at these numbers," Cooper said, showing them the papers. "The compression in each cylinder is exactly what it should be. The fuel injection system is clean. The oil pressure is perfect. But when we run the engine, it acts like something is holding it back." Peterson added, "It's costing us thousands of dollars every day. Our customers are getting mad because we can't fill their orders on time. Some of them are already looking for other furniture companies to work with." Lisa walked slowly around the big engine. She noticed things that the others might have missed, the way the metal vibrated in certain spots, a slight unevenness in the sound when the engine was running. These were small things, but they told her a story. "Can you start it up?" she asked. Peterson nodded to his manager, who pressed a big button. The engine roared to life, but Lisa could hear immediately that something wasn't right. It sounded powerful, but not as powerful as it should have been. She put her hand on different parts of the engine, feeling for vibrations. She listened carefully to every sound. After a few minutes, she asked them to turn it off. "What do you think?" Roberto asked his daughter. "I think this engine is trying to tell us something," Lisa said, "but we're not listening carefully enough." Cooper looked doubtful. "With all due respect, miss, we've had the best diesel mechanics in 3 states look at this engine. They all use the most advanced testing equipment. Sometimes the best equipment can't hear what your ears can hear," Lisa replied calmly. "And sometimes the most advanced tests can't feel what your hands can feel." Roberto smiled. He had taught Lisa to trust her senses when working on engines. Computers and fancy tools were helpful, but sometimes the human touch was more important. Peterson looked at his watch. "We're running out of options. The factory board is meeting next week to decide if we should buy a whole new engine. That would cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars." "What if we can't afford a new engine?" the factory manager asked quietly. Peterson's face got serious. "Then we might have to close the factory, at least temporarily." Lisa knew what that meant. Her dad's garage depended on the factory workers. If they lost their jobs, they wouldn't be able to pay for car repairs. The whole town would suffer. "Give me 3 days," Lisa said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "3 days to figure out what's wrong with your engine," she continued. Cooper shook his head. "Like I said, we've already had experts work on this for months." "But you haven't had me work on it," Lisa said with quiet confidence. Roberto put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Lisa, this is a big responsibility. If something goes wrong..." "Dad, I know engines. This one is just bigger than usual, but..." "Engines are engines. They all work on the same basic principles." Peterson looked at Cooper, then at the factory manager. They whispered among themselves for a moment. "What would it cost?" Peterson finally asked. "If I can't fix it, nothing," Lisa said. "If I can fix it, we'll talk about a fair price." This got Peterson's attention. "You're that confident?" "I'm confident that this engine wants to work properly," Lisa said. "Something is stopping it. I just need to find out what." Cooper still looked doubtful, but Peterson was interested. "What makes you think you can solve this when everyone else has failed?" Lisa walked back to the engine and put her hand on its side. "Because I'm not just looking at test results on paper. I'm listening to what the engine is telling me." She pointed to a spot on the engine block. "When this engine runs, it vibrates a little differently right here. The sound changes just slightly when you're standing on this side versus that side. These are clues." "Clues to what?" the factory manager asked. "I don't know yet," Lisa admitted. "But every engine has its own personality. This one has been running for 80 years. It has stories to tell." Roberto looked proud of his daughter, but also worried. "Lisa, if you take this job and can't solve it, it could hurt our reputation. And if I don't take it, the factory might close and hurt the whole town," Lisa replied. Peterson made his decision. "Okay, Lisa, 3 days, but I need to be honest. With you, if you can't fix it, we're going to have to make some hard choices about the factory." "I understand," Lisa said. "But I have a feeling this engine has been waiting for someone to really listen to it." As the men loaded the huge engine back onto the truck, Lisa was already making plans. She would need to study not just the engine, but its history. Where had it come from? Who had worked on it before? What had it been through in its 80 years of service? Roberto watched his daughter, thinking. He had seen that look before. It was the same look she had when she was a little girl and had found a broken toy that everyone else said couldn't be fixed. "You really think you can solve this?" he asked quietly. Lisa looked at the truck driving away with the mysterious engine. "Dad, I think this engine has a secret, and I think it's been waiting a long time for someone to discover it." That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the engine and the way it sounded. Something about it reminded her of stories her grandfather used to tell, but she couldn't remember what. She made a mental note to visit the town library tomorrow. Sometimes the answers to present problems could be found in the past. The next morning would begin the most important 3 days of Lisa's career. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to uncover a mystery that would change not just the engine, but her entire family's future. The next morning came too quickly for Lisa. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts about the mysterious engine. By 6 in the morning, she was already at the garage, drinking coffee and making a list of everything she needed to do. Father Roberto arrived an hour later, surprised to find all the lights on and Lisa already working at her desk. "You're up early," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot Lisa had made. "I couldn't sleep," Lisa replied, looking up from a notebook filled with sketches and notes. "Dad, I keep thinking about what that engine was trying to tell us yesterday." Roberto sat down across from his daughter. "What do you mean?" "When I put my hand on different parts of the engine, I felt something strange. It wasn't running smoothly everywhere. There were spots that felt different, like something was interfering with the normal flow." "Could be worn parts," Roberto suggested. "That's what I thought at first. But the test results showed everything was in good condition. So why would some parts feel different than others?" Lisa showed her father the sketches she had made. They were detailed drawings of the engine from every angle she could remember. "I drew everything I could remember from yesterday. Look at this section here." She pointed to one part of her drawing. "This area vibrated differently than the rest. And over here, the sound was just slightly off." Roberto studied his daughter's drawings. He had taught her well over the years, and he trusted her instincts about mechanical problems. "What's your plan?" he asked. "First, I want to research this engine. I need to know everything about it, where it came from, who built it, what it was designed to do. Then I want to take it apart, piece by piece, until I find what's hiding inside." At 8 o'clock, the truck arrived with the engine. Peterson and his team helped Roberto and Lisa move it into the garage using a small crane. The engine looked even bigger inside the garage than it had outside. "Remember, you have 3 days," Peterson reminded Lisa as he prepared to leave. "I really hope you can find something we missed." After Peterson left, Lisa walked around the engine again, this time taking detailed measurements and photos. She wanted to document everything before she started taking it apart. "Dad, I'm going to the library this afternoon," she said. "I want to learn about this engine's history." "Good idea," Roberto agreed. "I'll start removing the outer cover so we can see inside better." Lisa spent the morning carefully removing parts and labeling everything. Each bolt, each gasket, each component was photographed and tagged so she could put everything back together, exactly as it was. As she worked, she paid close attention to how each part felt in her hands. Most of the components felt normal, but a few pieces seemed heavier than they should be, or shaped slightly differently than she expected. Around noon, Lisa drove to the town library. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, had known Lisa since she was a little girl. "What brings you here today, Lisa?" Mrs. Chen asked with a smile. "I'm researching an old engine from the 1940s. It's from the furniture factory. I need to know about its history." Mrs. Chen led Lisa to the local history section. "We have newspaper archives going back to the 1800s and some factory records that were donated by the Peterson family years ago." Lisa spent the next 3 hours reading through old newspapers and documents. What she found was fascinating. During World War II, the furniture factory had been converted to make parts for military equipment. The articles talked about how important the factory was to the war effort. One article from 1943 caught her attention. It mentioned that the factory had installed a new, more efficient engine to keep production running during wartime fuel shortages. The article praised the innovative modifications that allowed the factory to operate when other businesses were struggling. But the article didn't give details about what these modifications were. Lisa made notes about the dates and continued searching. In the factory records, she found purchase orders and work reports from the 1940s. Most of the papers were routine business documents, but one folder was labeled Confidential war production. Modifications. Inside the folder, Lisa found something interesting. There were several work orders for fuel system adaptations and efficiency improvements during 1943 and 1944. The orders were signed by someone named Eduardo Martinez. Lisa stared at the name. Martinez was her family name. Could this, Eduardo, be related to her? She asked Mrs. Chen if there were any birth or death records for Eduardo Martinez. "Let me check," Mrs. Chen said, pulling out another set of files. After a few minutes, she found what they were looking for. Eduardo Martinez, born 1910, died 1945. He was a master mechanic at the furniture factory during the war years. Lisa felt her heart beating faster. "Do you have any information about his family?" Mrs. Chen looked through more records. "Yes, here it is. He was married to Maria Martinez and they had one son named Roberto, born in 1940. Lisa's hand started shaking. Roberto was her father's name and her father was born in 1940. This Eduardo Martinez was her grandfather. "Mrs. Chen, do you have any more information about what Eduardo did at the factory?" "Let me see what else I can find," Mrs. Chen said, searching through more files. "Here's something interesting. There's a letter from the factory owner in 1943 praising Eduardo's brilliant engineering solutions that saved the factory during the war." Lisa read the letter carefully. It talked about how Eduardo had designed special modifications to keep the factory running when regular fuel was hard to get. The letter mentioned that these modifications were kept secret for security reasons. "This is amazing," Lisa whispered. "My grandfather worked on the same engine I'm trying to fix now." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Small world, isn't it? Would you like copies of these documents?" "Yes, please, all of them." Lisa drove back to the garage with her head spinning. Her grandfather had worked on the same engine 80 years ago. He had made secret modifications during the war. Could those modifications still be affecting the engine today? When she arrived at the garage, Roberto had made good progress taking the engine apart. Several large sections were now separated, revealing the inner workings of the massive machine. "Dad, sit down," Lisa said. "I have something incredible to tell you." She showed her father all the documents she had found and explained about Eduardo Martinez. Roberto's eyes went wide. "Eduardo Martinez was my father, your grandfather, but he died when I was very young. I never knew exactly what kind of work he did. Grandfather didn't just work on engines. He was a master mechanic who designed special modifications for this exact engine during World War II. Father and daughter stared at each other, then at the engine they were working on. "So this engine," Roberto said slowly, "might still have modifications that your grandfather built into it 80 years ago. That would explain why it's acting strange," Lisa said excitedly. "Everyone has been trying to fix a standard engine, but this isn't a standard engine. It's been modified." They spent the rest of the afternoon looking at the engine with new eyes. If Eduardo had made secret modifications, where would they be hidden? Lisa studied her grandfather's work orders more carefully. One order mentioned secondary fuel lines and adaptive combustion chambers. Another talked about concealed efficiency systems. "Dad, what if the engine isn't broken at all? What if it's designed to work differently than everyone expects?" Roberto nodded thoughtfully. "If your grandfather built secret modifications into this engine, they might still be there. But after 80 years, they probably need maintenance." Lisa looked at the partially disassembled engine. "Tomorrow I'm going to look for every modification grandfather made. I bet that's why the engine isn't running at full power." As evening approached, Lisa and Roberto covered the engine parts carefully. They had solved part of the mystery, but the biggest discoveries were still ahead. "Lisa," Roberto said as they locked up the garage, "I'm proud of what you found today. Your grandfather would be proud too. We're not done yet, Dad. Tomorrow I'm going to find his hidden modifications, and I'm going to make them work again." That night, Lisa stayed up late studying the technical drawings she had found at the library. Eduardo Martinez had been a genius. His modifications were so clever that they had been completely hidden from view for 80 years. But Lisa was beginning to understand how her grandfather's mind worked. He had designed the modifications to be invisible to anyone who didn't know. They were there, The engine could run on regular fuel, but it was also designed to run on alternative fuels when necessary. The fuel shortages during World War II had required creative solutions. Eduardo had created a system that could adapt to different types of fuel, giving the factory the flexibility it needed to keep running no matter what fuel was available. But over the decades, as the war ended and regular fuel became available again, everyone had forgotten about the adaptive system. The engine had been running on pure diesel for 80 years, while its hidden system slowly became clogged and inefficient. Lisa was sure she was on the right track. Tomorrow, she would find her grandfather's secret modifications and bring them back to life. The engine wasn't broken. It was just waiting for someone who understood its hidden capabilities. As she finally fell asleep, Lisa smiled. Her grandfather had left her a puzzle to solve, and she was going to solve it. Lisa woke up before dawn on the second day. Her dreams had been filled with images of her grandfather working on the massive engine, his hands moving skillfully over metal parts she had never seen before. She felt like he was trying to tell her something important. Roberto was already at the garage when she arrived, standing next to the engine with a cup of coffee in his hands. "I couldn't sleep either," he said when he saw Lisa. "I kept thinking about my father. I wish I could remember more about him." "Maybe today we'll learn more about him through his work," Lisa replied, rolling up her sleeves. She had brought all the historical documents with her, along with a magnifying glass and several small tools for detailed work. If her grandfather had hidden modifications in the engine, she was going to find them. According to these work orders, grandfather installed something called a secondary fuel distribution system. That means there should be extra fuel lines somewhere in this engine. Roberto helped Lisa remove more of the outer casing. As they worked deeper into the engine, Lisa kept checking the technical drawings she had found at the library. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one of the drawings. "Grandfather drew a fuel line that goes here, but when I look at the actual engine, I don't see that line." "Maybe it was removed over the years," Roberto suggested. "Or maybe it's hidden," Lisa said thoughtfully. She ran her hands along the engine block, feeling for anything that didn't match the standard design. After an hour of careful searching, Lisa's fingers found something unusual. There was a section of the engine block that felt different from the rest. It was smooth where it should have been rough and slightly warmer to the touch. "Dad, help me look at this section more carefully." They used flashlights to examine the area Lisa had found. At first it looked like a normal part of the engine block, but when Lisa looked at it from a different angle, she could see very faint lines in the metal. "This looks like it opens somehow," she said excitedly. Roberto brought over some of his smallest tools. Working together, father and daughter carefully explored the hidden panel. After several minutes, they heard a small click, and a section of the engine block swung open like a door. "Incredible," Roberto whispered. "Your grandfather was a true artist." Inside the hidden compartment, they found an amazing sight. There were brass pipes, small valves, and what looked like a completely separate fuel injection system. Everything was covered with decades of dust and grime, but the metalwork was beautiful. "This is why the engine has been running poorly," Lisa said. "This hidden system is probably clogged up after 80 years. As they carefully cleaned the hidden components, Lisa found something that made her heart skip a beat. Tucked behind one of the brass pipes was a small metal container, sealed tight against moisture and time. "What do you think is in there?" Roberto asked. Lisa carefully opened the container. Inside were several folded papers protected by a layer of wax paper. The documents were yellowed with age but still readable. The first paper was a letter written in Spanish. Lisa's Spanish wasn't perfect, but she could understand most of it. It was written by her grandfather Eduardo to his family. "What does it say?" Roberto asked. Lisa translated slowly. "He says, 'If anyone finds this letter, it means they have discovered my secret work. The engine can run on different types of fuel when the hidden system is working. During the war, we used grain alcohol mixed with diesel when regular fuel was hard to get.'" The letter continued with technical details about how the system worked. But the next part made Lisa's hands shake as she read it. "Dad, listen to this." Grandfather writes, "The factory owner promised me a share of the increased profits from my modifications. He said my family would be taken care of after the war. But I'm getting sick and I worry this promise will be forgotten. I'm hiding these papers as proof of our agreement. Roberto sat down heavily on a nearby stool. What kind of agreement? Lisa unfolded another document. It was an official-looking paper with signatures at the bottom. It's a contract, Dad, between grandfather and the factory owner in 1943. She read the contract carefully. According to the document, Eduardo Martinez was supposed to receive 5% of the factory's increased profits from his efficiency improvements. The contract was signed by Eduardo and by Thomas Peterson, David Peterson's grandfather. This says grandfather was supposed to be paid for his innovations, Lisa said. But he died in 1945, just 2 years after signing this. Roberto looked at the faded signatures. So the Peterson family owed money to our family? Lisa did some quick math in her head. Dad, if the factory has been more efficient for 80 years, because of grandfather's work, and he was supposed to get 5% of the increased profits, we're talking about a lot of money. But there was more in the container. The last document was a detailed drawing of the entire hidden fuel system, with notes in Eduardo's handwriting explaining how to maintain and repair it. This is like finding buried treasure, Roberto said softly. Lisa studied her grandfather's technical drawings. It's more than treasure, Dad. This proves that grandfather was a genius. Look at this design. It's incredible. He created a system that could automatically adjust to different fuel types. As they continued cleaning the hidden components, Lisa began to understand how brilliant her grandfather's design really was. The system could sense what type of fuel was being used and adjust the engine's performance accordingly. During the war, when diesel fuel was mixed with grain alcohol or other substitutes, the engine could still run at full power. But Dad, here's the problem, Lisa said. The engine has been running on pure diesel for 80 years. The hidden system is designed for fuel mixtures, so it's been fighting against the pure diesel this whole time. That's why the engine only runs at 60% power, Roberto realized. Exactly. Everyone thought the engine was broken, but it's actually working exactly as grandfather designed it. It's just not getting the right fuel mixture. Lisa looked at her grandfather's maintenance notes. According to his instructions, the hidden system needed to be cleaned and adjusted every few years. But nobody had known it existed, so it had never been maintained. We need to clean all these components and test the system, Lisa said. But first, I think we should tell Peterson what we've found. Roberto looked worried. Lisa, these documents show that his family owed money to our family. That might make him angry. Or it might make him want to do the right thing, Lisa replied. We'll never know unless we tell him the truth. They spent the rest of the morning carefully cleaning each component of the hidden fuel system. Lisa followed. Her grandfather's detailed instructions, and slowly the brass pipes and valves began to shine like new. As she worked, Lisa felt a strange connection to her grandfather. She had never met him, but through his technical drawings and careful notes she was getting to know him. He had been a man who took pride in his work and cared about doing things right. Dad, look at this, Lisa said, pointing to a note Eduardo had written in the margin of one drawing. He wrote, "This engine will serve the town for many generations if properly cared for. I hope my son Roberto will understand this work someday." Roberto's eyes filled with tears. He was thinking about me even then. By afternoon, Lisa had the hidden system partially restored, but she knew they needed to test it properly before calling Peterson. According to Eduardo's notes, the system needed a specific fuel mixture to demonstrate its full capabilities. We need to mix diesel with ethanol, Lisa said, reading her grandfather's instructions. The ratio should be about 70% diesel and 30% ethanol. Roberto went to get the different fuels while Lisa made final adjustments to the system. When everything was ready, they started the engine with the new fuel mixture. The difference was immediate and dramatic. The engine roared to life with more power than Lisa had ever heard from it. The vibrations were smooth and even, and the sound was deep and strong. "It's working," Roberto shouted over the engine noise. Lisa monitored the hidden gauges that Eduardo had installed. Everything was running perfectly. The engine was now producing the full power it had been designed for. They ran the engine for 30 minutes and it performed flawlessly. Lisa took detailed measurements and photos to document the improvement. "Dad, we need to call Peterson," she said after they shut down the engine. "But first, we need to decide what we're going to do about the contract." Roberto looked at the historical documents spread out on his workbench. "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should be honest about everything," Lisa said. "We found the problem with the engine, and we found proof about grandfather's agreement. Let Peterson decide what's fair." "What if he doesn't want to honor the contract?" Lisa smiled. "Then at least we'll have solved the engine problem and learned about our family history. That's worth something too." But privately, Lisa hoped Peterson would do the right thing. The documents clearly showed that her grandfather had made innovations that saved the factory during the war and had continued to benefit the business for 80 years. As evening approached, Lisa and Roberto carefully packed up all the historical documents and photos of their work. Tomorrow would be the final day of Lisa's 3-day deadline, and she had a lot to explain to Peterson. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Roberto said, "I'm proud of what we've discovered. Your grandfather would be proud too." Lisa looked at the restored engine, now running smoothly with its hidden systems functioning properly. "I think grandfather knew that someday, someone from our family would find his secret work. He left us all the clues we needed." The biggest revelation was still to come. Tomorrow, Lisa would have to decide how to handle the truth about her family's forgotten legacy and whether justice could finally be served after 80 years of waiting. The third morning arrived with gray clouds covering the sky. Lisa had barely slept again, but this time it wasn't because of the engine problem. She had solved that. Now she faced a much harder challenge, telling Peterson the truth about what she had discovered. Roberto made coffee while Lisa organized all the documents they had found. The historical papers, the photos of the restored engine, and the proof of the contract were spread across the workbench like pieces of a puzzle that told an amazing story. "Are you nervous about talking to Peterson?" Roberto asked, handing his daughter a cup of coffee. "A little," Lisa admitted. "This isn't just about fixing an engine anymore. This is about our family's history and what's right." At 9 o'clock sharp, Peterson arrived with the same team as before, his factory manager and the consultant Cooper. They looked tired and worried. "Well, Lisa," Peterson said, "today is your deadline. Do you have good news for us?" Lisa took a deep breath. "I have news for you. Some of it is very good and some of it might surprise you." She led them over to the engine, which was now completely reassembled. "First, let me show you that your engine is fixed." Peterson's eyes widened. "You actually solved it?" "More than solved it," Lisa said. She started the engine with the special fuel mixture she and her father had prepared. The sound that filled the garage was incredible. The engine ran smoother and more powerfully than anyone had heard in decades. The deep, steady rumble was like music. Cooper pulled out his testing equipment and ran several quick checks. "This is impossible," he said, staring at his readings. "The power output is 120% of what we expected." "It's not just fixed," Peterson said with amazement. "It's running better than it ever has." Lisa let the engine run for several minutes so they could see that the improvement was real and lasting. When she finally shut it off, the silence seemed strange after the powerful sound. "How did you do it?" Peterson asked. Lisa looked at her father, then back at Peterson. "That's where the story gets interesting. The problem wasn't that your engine was broken. The problem was that nobody understood how it was really supposed to work." She showed them the hidden compartment that Eduardo had built into the engine. "Your engine has secret modifications that were installed during World War II. They've been there for 80 years, but nobody knew about them." Cooper examined the hidden fuel system with fascination. "This is incredible engineering. Who designed this?" "That's the part that might surprise you," Lisa said carefully. "The modifications were designed and installed by my grandfather, Eduardo Martinez." Peterson looked confused. "Your grandfather worked at the factory?" Lisa showed him the historical documents they had found. He was the master mechanic during the war years. He created this system so the factory could keep running when regular fuel was hard to get. As Peterson read through the old work orders and technical drawings, his expression changed from confusion to amazement. These modifications saved the factory during the war, Peterson said slowly. Without them, we would have had to shut down like so many other businesses. There's more, Lisa said gently. She handed him the contract that Eduardo had signed with his grandfather, Thomas Peterson. Peterson read the document carefully and his face went pale. This is a contract between my grandfather and yours. It says. He paused and read it again. It says your grandfather was supposed to receive 5% of the increased profits from his modifications. Roberto stepped forward. My father died in 1945, just 2 years after signing that contract. I was only 5 years old. I never knew about any of this. Cooper looked at the contract over Peterson's shoulder. If this is legitimate, and these modifications have been improving the factory's efficiency for 80 years, Peterson sat down heavily on a nearby chair. The amount of money we're talking about would be substantial. Very substantial. Lisa watched Peterson's face carefully. She couldn't tell if he was angry, worried, or something else. I understand this is a shock, Lisa said. But I wanted to be honest about everything we found. Peterson was quiet for a long time, reading through all the documents. Finally, he looked up at Lisa and Roberto. Can I ask you something, he said. Why didn't you just fix the engine and keep quiet about the rest? You could have taken the money for the repair job and never mentioned the contract. Lisa looked at her father, then back at Peterson. Because that wouldn't have been right. My grandfather built something amazing that helped your family's business for 80 years. If there was an agreement, it should be honored. Even though it might cost my family a lot of money? Even though, Lisa said firmly. Peterson stood up and walked over to the engine. He put his hand on the metal just as Lisa had done 3 days earlier. You know, he said quietly, my grandfather left some papers when he died. Old business documents that I never paid much attention to. But now that I think about it, there were some files he kept separate from everything else. He called them his unfinished business. Roberto's eyes widened. Unfinished business? I'm going to call my office and have someone bring those files. Here, Peterson said. If we're going to solve this mystery, we need to know the whole story. While they waited for the files to arrive, Peterson asked Lisa to explain exactly how the hidden fuel system worked. She walked him through every component, using Eduardo's technical drawings to show how brilliant the design was. Your grandfather was a genius, Peterson said with genuine admiration. This system is decades ahead of its time. Even today, most engineers couldn't design something this sophisticated. An hour later, Peterson's assistant arrived with a box of old documents. Peterson went through them carefully until he found what he was looking for. Here it is, he said, pulling out a folder marked Eduardo Martinez, Special Projects. Inside, the folder were copies of the same contract Lisa had found, along with other documents. But there was also a letter written by Thomas Peterson, dated just a few months before Eduardo's death. Peterson read the letter out loud. Eduardo Martinez has provided invaluable service to our company during these difficult times. His innovations have not only kept us running, but have positioned us for success in the post-war economy. I am committed to honoring our agreement and ensuring his family benefits from his contributions. The letter went on to describe Thomas Peterson's plans to make payments to Eduardo's family after the war ended, but Eduardo had died before those plans could be carried out. There's more, Peterson said, finding another document. My grandfather wrote a memo to himself about setting aside money for the Martinez family. He calculated that the efficiency improvements were worth about 10% increase in profits. Cooper whistled softly. 10% over 80 years. That's a fortune. Peterson looked at Roberto with serious eyes. My grandfather intended to honor this agreement. The only reason it didn't happen was because Eduardo died. And in the chaos after the war, the details got forgotten. What does this mean? Roberto asked. Peterson was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Finally, he made his decision. It means we're going to do what my grandfather intended to do 80 years ago, Peterson said. We're going to honor this agreement. Lisa, felt her heart beating faster. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that the Martinez family deserves to be compensated for Eduardo's contributions. Not just for the past, but for the future, too. Peterson explained his proposal. He wanted to create a partnership between the Peterson and Martinez families. Roberto and Lisa would become part owners of a new division of the company, focused on engine restoration and historical preservation. Your grandfather's innovations shouldn't be forgotten, Peterson said. And your skills, Lisa, are exactly what we need to preserve and improve these old engines. But Peterson had an even bigger surprise. I've been thinking about expanding the business anyway. There are factories all over the country with old engines that could benefit from this kind of restoration work. With Lisa's knowledge and Eduardo's designs, we could build something really special. Over the next hour, they worked out the details. The Martinez family would receive back payments calculated from the contract terms, plus ownership in the new restoration business. Lisa would lead the technical work, and Roberto could help with the day-to-day operations. There's one condition, Peterson added with a smile. We're going to put up a plaque at the factory honoring Eduardo Martinez and his contributions during the war. People should know what he did for this town. Lisa felt tears in her eyes. 3 days ago, she had just been trying to fix a broken engine. Now she had discovered her family's forgotten legacy and found a way to honor her grandfather's memory. There's something else, Peterson said. I want to document everything about Eduardo's modifications. We should publish his designs so other engineers can learn from them. Your grandfather was ahead of his time. His ideas could help solve modern problems, too. As the afternoon wore on, they made plans for the new business. Lisa would start by restoring other old engines at the factory, then expand to work with companies across the region. The techniques Eduardo had developed during the war could be adapted for modern efficiency improvements. Roberto looked overwhelmed by everything that had happened. I can't believe this is real, he said. 3 days ago, we were just trying to help with a difficult repair job. Sometimes, Lisa said, when you listen carefully to what an engine is trying to tell you, you discover more than you expected. Peterson laughed. In this case, the engine was trying to tell us about justice and family honor. 6 months later, Lisa stood next to the same engine that had started everything. But now it was running in a factory that had a bronze plaque reading, in honor of Eduardo Martinez, 1910-1945, master mechanic and innovator, whose genius kept America's factories running when it mattered most. The Martinez-Peterson Heritage Engine Company had restored dozens of old engines and had contracts with companies in 5 states. Lisa had become known as the mechanic who could solve impossible problems by listening to what engines were really trying to say. But most importantly, Eduardo Martinez's legacy was no longer forgotten. His innovations lived on. His family was honored, and his story inspired a new generation of mechanics and engineers who understood that sometimes the best solutions come from combining old wisdom with new determination. The impossible engine had been fixed, but more than that, a family's honor had been restored and a town's history had been made complete.